Carolina Hoops is full steam ahead and heading to Bloomington, Indiana this weekend to take on the 16th ranked Hoosiers. This is a game we'll be talking about for months, win or lose, as it pertains to Carolina's resume. And the gentleman who will so finely call it as he does all of them is the voice of Gamecock basketball, Derek Scott, dressed in blue today. Hey, man.
It's the day job. Every once in a while you got to rep the day job during the day.
Every so often you got to.
Hey, I got a bone to pick. I hear Sherbert, who is just down the road from Bloomington.
Sherbert.
No, I said Sherbert.
No, people say Schubert. I'm glad you didn't say Schubert.
I should have, I guess. I'm trying to make
I'm going to start calling you Derek.
Yeah, you called a lot worse.
You're right.
I'm with you. Derek.
All right, so get on me, and I'll have a response.
So, what's your story? You already had tickets booked. Is that what we're going with?
All right, so we've been planning on going to the Missouri football game this year since before the Indiana basketball game was announced. And so what had happened was my stepson plays varsity football. And it goes till about the end of October up here. If they make the playoffs, it may go till Thanksgiving, like most states. And so we had to follow the Lockport Porters around on Friday night. There's nothing that gets you from Chicago to Columbia in time for anything but a 7:30 game.
Right.
The only 7:30 games were Akron, and I'm not going to have his first SEC game ever, college football game ever, be against Akron. Because the second half, he would have run away going, this is the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life. No offense to Akron. And then A&M, it was just like they ended up not making the playoffs, so we could have come, but it's a quick turnaround because that's the first round. And so, and then he grew up with this girl that my wife's friends with, was friends with her ex-husband. And their daughter goes to South Carolina.
There's always a female involved, Derek.
So they were planning on coming to this Missouri game as well. So we've had this thing circled for a long, long time, since April, really. And heck, otherwise I would be in Bloomington because it's only like 3 hours and some change. Right. I will say this, though. My man John Whittle is making the trip to Bloomington. He's a closet Pacers fan anyway, so he gets to go up there. And man, I every time I drive to South Carolina, even tonight, I'll probably no, we're getting off because we got to get to West Virginia. But coming back from Nashville, went right past the Bloomington exit. I've stayed right there in Seymour, Indiana, at that hotel when I couldn't drive any further coming back from Columbia. So I hate it. I mean, I love basketball, and there's so much history there and stuff. It would have been awesome to go, but I'm kind of maybe trying to, he's at school, he won't hear me, I'm trying to get him to want to go to South Carolina for college. So that's I'm going to give him the silent hard sell. So that there's family considerations. And I honestly, Derek, we got tickets right there in West Club, right where 2001 happens. It's going to be a big crowd. Wife's the biggest crowd she's been at's Michigan State. We came to Kentucky and Carolina in 2021. The crowd wasn't all the way back. Right there for this game, most of it's going to be at night. He's never been to a college football game ever. I think there's going to be some crapping of the pants when they see what happens at Williams-Brice. So
hold on, enrolling by.
I had a good answer for you there but honestly, man, I mean. You're talking to the guy that was pulling for Carolina to get sent to the Indiana State Baseball Regional last year. I was gonna haul it down there to Sycamore Country, man.
There you go.
Hey, tell Lamont to schedule Northwestern home and home. I'll be there.
Yeah.
That's an easy one. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of schedule, Derek, is there any talk about Indiana returning this game?
No, this is a one-off. This is probably a sign of the times in that this is a good enough financial payday in an era where you're starting to figure out what are the things you have to fund, whether it be NIL or whatever. I mean, you got to look at opportunities. And he is he's a Big Ten guy for a lot of years, and I think he knows opponents, he knows venues. I don't know. I just get a hunch that this was one that he saw and felt like this is a good opportunity for us. This is going to be a chance to play a top 20 team on the road in a great venue, and maybe be, give yourself an opportunity for a resume win.
Have you ever been there?
I have not. I've done one Indiana game in my life. I was a student broadcaster at Marshall, and we played in the Hoosier Classic, which was at Old Market Square Arena in Indianapolis. So I have now the beauty of that was I got to witness Bobby Knight basically de-pants a TV reporter in a post-game press conference, and it was glorious. And it also struck the fear of God in me as to there are some questions that you don't ask to certain people, and you learn at a very young age, if you're fortunate enough to see it in college and have someone else be the victim. And so I learned a lot in that moment. So,
what was it? Do you remember
your experience? But I will say this: I've told this story since then. I was probably 20 years old. You knew it was different in that part of the world in terms of their love of college hoops. When the preliminary game, it's a 4-team tournament, and Marshall's the 4th seed. So we're playing Indiana in the late game. So the first game, I don't even recall who was there, but it's a couple of whatever teams, nobody that Indiana fans should care about. But they're there early enough that they're watching the first game. And there were guys I noticed early on who were just angry at the post players for the other team, these meaningless teams, because of their footwork not being good enough. In my brain, I remember a guy just screaming, "Drop step him. Please, will you just drop step him?" And I thought, my God, this matters to these people. It's that stuck with me all those years later, 30 plus years later.
You wonder, this got brought up yesterday. You wonder if Indiana football was at home this weekend, what the crowd would look like in both the gym and in the ballpark.
Yeah, I think they're smart enough to schedule their home games around that to some degree. I'm sure they never worried about Indiana football being competition, that's for sure. But it's certainly it'll make for better atmosphere knowing that Signetti's guys are getting the week off and prepping up for their end-all be-all matchup with the Buckeyes.
Before we get into what has evolved since we last spoke to you with the team and the wins and stuff like that, do you sense that this group will walk in with any sort of, I don't want to say shock, but being in that gym, all the history for the first time, probably no? Okay.
And the only reason I say that, the only reason I answer with any confidence is I asked Lamont that on the post-game interview the other night, and he said, no, let's face it, Indiana has not been what they once were in these kids' lifetimes, really. And so there's not going to be that, prestige program. They'll see, and he will emphasize, I'm sure, hey, this is the number 16 team in the country. But no, I don't think they are viewing this with the curiosity and interest and expectations that probably a lot of us old heads are. And that's just, just a matter of age more than anything.
Well, they play in Rupp Arena every year. So,
right.
I mean, there's plenty of history in there, and it's about twice the size, I think. Well, Derek, of course they lose that first game against North Florida, and we talked about that. And then since then they've steamrolled South Carolina State, and I thought what they did to Towson the other night was quite impressive. I like Towson. I think that they're going to be really good. I know that they were picked to win the CAA in the preseason, and we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. But they got some nice pieces to that club, and Carolina, and obviously Jacoby Wright's on fire. Pringle's starting to get the ball more. You mentioned that last week, and here he is getting the ball more, and it's going through the hoop. Colin Murray-Boyles is kind of doing his thing. Do you feel like they're kind of discovering who they are now after a little bit of a bump there to start?
Well, I will say that first half of the game against Towson was easily the best half of basketball we've seen from that group, and it was against an opponent that had the best resume coming in. Now, resume doesn't, guarantee results this year, but to what you were just saying, they're the preseason favorite in a better league than either of those previous two teams play in. And I happen to have a very good friend who's a head coach in that league. And so I was getting a lot of, feedback from him beforehand about the matchup and then afterwards. And that's all he would say is, man, that's going to be a real good win for you guys down the road. That surprises me that you handled them as easily as you did. And so, we hear that from other coaches. That makes you feel even better about what your eyes showed you. So, yeah, I think so. And it's not necessarily that they necessarily have to figure out, how they fit together. It's really much more a matter of people doing the things they're capable of. And Pringle did the things he's capable of against, Towson. He hadn't necessarily done that the first couple games. Now, not everything was perfect. Jamari Martin played his worst game of the 3 games there. So you don't have everyone necessarily in lockstep, but that's rare that you do anyway. But certainly when you get that kind of interior play from Murray-Boyles and Pringle, that's when this team is going to be, I would have to say at its best. And I said Jamari Martin, by the way, it's Jamari Thomas.
Yeah.
But point being that they'll need that on Saturday too. Indiana is going to come at you at 6'9", 7 feet across their front line. And, Mike Woodson hit the portal this year and tried to upgrade their perimeter play. And he may very well have. But this team, to look at their numbers through their first couple of games and the exhibition they played against Tennessee, they are still heavily, heavily reliant on 2-point field goals compared to where most of the game is these days. There are so many more teams that are leaning heavily into the 3. In Indiana, that was kind of a criticism of them last year. Not only did they not have 3-point shooters, but they didn't even seem interested in leaning on that part of the game. And so far this year, the percentage of shots, your points coming from 3s versus what comes from 2s, it's still very one-sided. So it's still going to be about the interior, I believe, and that means Pringle and Murray-Boyles will really have to hold up against the likes of Umar Ballo and Malik Renault and Mackenzie Mbako.
Man, I hate to even ask this, but it's bothering me. And I'm probably irrational. I talked about it the other day. Any concern about Cam Scott's start to the season so far?
No, and only because, as a freshman, I don't expect it to come easy. Last year, Murray-Boyles was the exception to the rule. More often than not, it's not an easy transition. I would say for him more than anything, it's figuring out, going back to what JB said, where does he fit? Because he took a ton of shots against SC State. He had the most field goal attempts of anybody on the roster, and I'm not sure that's what they wanted, unless he was really hot, which he was not. But then he turned around the other night, and his minutes were down considerably. And I think he only took 1 shot that I recall. So I still think there's the feeling out process going on. If you noticed against that Towson team, which is really, really good defensively, it seemed like Coach Paris decided, I'm going to match that. I'm putting my best defenders on the court. The rotation was a lot smaller than I expected to be this early in the season. Usually the rotation shrinks when conference play starts. But the rotation from game 1 to game 3 has gotten significantly smaller, and it's the unproven, inexperienced guys who are the ones who are kind of getting left out. Arden Conyers' numbers, percentage-wise, minutes down. Cam Scott's went down for this most recent game. You're seeing the older guys get leaned on a little more heavily, and I think that's because defensively, that's where you can get exposed. Cam being a guy who's been so much about offense in his high school career, he got attacked a lot the first couple of games. I noticed one-on-one matchups. Other coaches were immediately going to go at the freshman. And
sure.
That makes it hard if you're playing a team, like Indiana, which jump up levels. But we'll see, because the other side of that is South Carolina hasn't shot 3s particularly well early, and he's your best option. Right now, Jacoby is, but big picture, long term, Cam Scott's got to make 3-pointers for this team to be consistent offensively. So you need him to come along, but I'm not worried about it just yet.
No, and I said the same thing to JC. I 3 games in, true freshman. We've watched Lamont Paris just develop him and his staff over the last couple of years. This kid's going to be fine. It's just a matter of where he'll fit in. But the good news with all of this, though, is Jacoby Wright. I think we mentioned it last week when we talked to you, Derek. it feels like, hey man, this is my turn. Okay, it's my turn. I've been here. I've watched this thing sink to the bottom. I've watched it rise to the top. I've been here through the coaching change. I have given everything I've got to Gamecock basketball. It just feels like it's his turn. And he's done some special things here with some big shots and wins and this, that, and the other. And now he's in the starting lineup. I just feel like he's earned it. I love watching him play the game. He's smart. But we're talking about all this stuff. One of the things that this team, like we're talking about the offense. How about the defense? You got to play defense to play for Lamont Paris, and these guys have been doing that.
Yeah, and that's where, I asked him about this post game against Towson at halftime. If you weren't listening to me, you probably didn't notice. I don't know if anything was said on TV, but do you know who played the most minutes in the first half of that game? Of anybody on that Gamecock roster?
Was it Ugasuk?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I was about to say, I thought I heard. Yeah, I remember that. Okay. Yeah.
And that's because he was steady defensively and offensively not making mistakes. And, that was that point where Jamari was throwing it all over the place. I think he had 4 assists, but he had 4 turnovers at halftime. And so they were going to put it in the hands of someone who wasn't going to give it to the other team. And that's kind of what I fall back on in terms of saying the rotation shrunk a little bit because you were counting on guys who can guard and guys who understand probably as much as anything that they understand the rules of Lamont's defense. And it's hard for freshmen to pick those up. And whereas with, the Jacoby, especially, he's in year 3 in that defensive scheme. So he knows where he's supposed to be, where he's not supposed to be, what chances to take, what chances not to take, what they're doing in all settings. So that is so, so valuable. And then if he's, making shots on top of it, there's absolutely no reason not to have him getting, the majority of the minutes in the backcourt.
Derek Scott, the voice of the Gamecocks. It's 11:40 here on Inside the Gamecocks, the show. All right, so CMB, he's, both those guys the other night him and Pringle were a board short. I mean, who's doing the stats in this thing? Somebody slipped one of these guys a rebound. They were both short a double-double. And when you watch them, Derek, from game 1 to game 3, you watch these two guys play. How are they feeding off of each other? What is that duo when you see them on the floor together? What's it look like to you?
Well, Murray-Boyles is a great passer. His court vision's tremendous. And I saw, Pringle is a very unselfish guy. The one time he tried to have a high-low feed to Murray-Boyles, great idea. He just delivered a fastball from, very close range, and CMB couldn't make the catch. But those two guys, as they get more and more comfortable with each other, that's going to be fun to watch, is how they, involve each other when they've got the ball on the block. And they're going to need that again Saturday, because you've got so much size they're going against. And I've already, talking to the guys at Indiana and the media relations, they've got 24 different scouting department or front office credentials prepared for NBA guys who are coming to watch this game. They want to see Murray-Boyles against that kind of size and skill from a Big Ten level. So there are going to be a ton of evaluators there, and I'm as anxious as anybody to see how he matches up with that Indiana front line, because it's very, very talented too.
Wow, what a stat! 24. Well, and you go back to the Oregon game in the tournament last year, and it was clear. That was when they walked on the floor, and you saw what I can't remember, Mbappe or Ngake or whatever his name was. There was an experience difference. There was a size difference, and for as high of a level as CMB had played at that point in time, I think like 3 months. He looked like a freshman against that kid.
He did, but he was also sick. That's the thing about that game. He was under the weather, and I'm not going to sit here and try and make excuses for him, but he was anywhere but 100% against Oregon, and it wasn't as lamentable and frustrating as what we saw with Sindarius in the national championship that time, but it was pretty darn frustrating for him not to be at full go against Infali Dante, because you needed all that he could bring you to try and offset that big beast of a guy who was just, a man in the post for Oregon. That's for sure.
What was his name? Dante.
Yeah, Dante. Infali Dante.
Yeah, Dante.
Mbappe is a soccer player.
Well, I wasn't trying to be offensive. I just couldn't remember the kid's name, but he was a freaking dude.
Whoever brought the big duck energy in that game.
Well, that's great.
When you can't pronounce the name, just say something vile and disgusting, and people forgive you for it.
People forgive works you every time.
Rule of thumb.
That's Radcap 101, man. What are you doing? There's nothing vile and disgusting.
There's no Castellanos to bail you out with a home run though, on a basketball court.
Hey, Tom Brenneman doing ACC football. I noticed last week. He's finally been allowed back out of purgatory.
Where'd they put him on the CW?
Yes.
Did they really?
He's right after Gilmore Girls, man.
I think it's his gig all season. Hey, I'm not going to poke. I've known Tom forever. I mean, you see the Ohio sign on the back. He's and he's everything I've ever known about him is a good man. He made a bad mistake and he paid for it dearly. But I am glad to see him get an opportunity.
Great broadcaster. I mean, good voice. He is. Really good.
Yeah, he's always been, I thought, fantastic. Yeah, no doubt.
I wasn't. Whoever was outraged about him getting back in, and there weren't that many people.
JC, we were in the era of outrage at that point.
Oh my Lord! No,
Are we out of that era?
I think we are.
I believe we are.
We're out of the era of outrage. I do.
I left that era about 18 months ago, but with my fingers crossed that I don't get canceled. But when you're on YouTube, the standards are different.
That's true.
That's a good point. I got one more player I want to ask you about, and I don't ever ask about players from a worrying standpoint or anything like that. Derek, the coaches know a little bit more than we do, so we just watch them play. But Jordan Butler's minutes have been limited thus far. What are they working on with him? I know he comes in, he'll fire one up from long range.
Yeah, they need more physicality. I mean, it's always going to be his challenge is to be willing at the defensive end to play big. I mean, that first game against North Florida, I mean, he's 6'11", he's 7 feet tall. And there were 6'7", 6'8" guys who were not at all scared to go right into his chest and try and score over him. And so it's just not something that's naturally in his DNA. And he's got to show a willingness to do that, because as much as the pick and pop opportunity can help you, if he's getting, worn out at the other end of the court, then you can't give those minutes to him. I mean, if you noticed, Benjamin Bozeman's Verdonk got the minutes ahead of him against that Towson team, but Towson also is a team that is notorious for how physical they play. They're not necessarily big, but man, I mean, they set ball screens like linebackers, and that I don't know that they felt like it was a great fit for him, that particular matchup. But again, with all the size Indiana has, he's going to have to be able to contribute.
Well, really looking forward to this, catching as much as I can. Then when we get into the ballpark, it'll be old Derek Scott right here in the ear while we're watching the game. I'll feel like my uncle from when I was growing up. They used to listen to Bob Fulton while we were in. I never understood it. Like we're sitting right here, row 36 and 14. We're watching the game, and you're listening to them call the game upstairs. Well, if an injury happens, they'll know, we don't know what's happening.
Right.
But I get to do that with Derek. I get to just listen to him call the basketball game while we're in the ballpark. So I'm really fired up about that. Hey, Derek, so JC's driving down today. He's going to come through. You're the pride of Beckley, West Virginia.
I'm the pride of Pineville, West Virginia. Thank you very much.
Pineville, West
Virginia. My mother lives now. But
so I think we're going through there.
JC's not going near Pineville. He'll go through Beckley, quite possibly.
So we're going Indianapolis.
So where's Pineville?
You go to Beckley, get off the interstate, and hold your breath. Because you're going 45 to 50 minutes deep into the mountains.
You're going east.
Yeah, from Beckley, you are going west, actually. So, it's
going
basically
west. Okay.
I'm as close to Bluefield over the mountain. It's very, very, very.
Yeah. We're getting on or going to Dayton, and then in Ohio, getting on a road called 35 or something.
Yep.
And then taking that to I-64 and then that to 77. So that's the way it routed us. You can go through Nashville and Atlanta, but that's 15 hours, and we got to get there at some point. Right?
You're making the right trip, and going through West Virginia this time of year. I haven't talked to my mom about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's still pretty fair foliage up there.
Yeah.
I don't know. They get ahead of us. The leaves may be off the trees by now. But if not, that could be a pretty drive for you.
Well, it'll be dark tonight, but
that's true.
Going back on Sunday is what I was thinking. And I've actually, Derek, I'm not offending you here. I've never been to West Virginia. Work has never taken me there.
Amazing.
So this will be my 39th state to mark off when I cross the state line tonight. So
when you're going up 77 and you get into Virginia and then into West Virginia, it will not disappoint. Even just off the interstate, you don't even have to get off the highway to see. Just the scenery will be fabulous for you on Sunday.
Yeah, I've been to Southwestern Virginia because I drove from Nashville to Blacksburg, which is I would never recommend that to anybody.
No,
but it was actually Shane Beamer was coaching at Virginia Tech. I helped start a Virginia Tech site for 24/7. So I had to go to Blacksburg a couple times, and that's a pretty drive. But never took that journey over to West Virginia, and looking forward to hitting that state, man, and not crossing another one off.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Safely. Glad to have you coming to Columbia. If you can't be in Bloomington, we will accept that as a very legitimate plan.
Yeah, just say a prayer for my stepson that he makes good choices after this college visit he's going on.
As
he's taking an unofficial.
As JB pointed out, there are other factors in play here, and we can respect that because whether it's a fight on an Auburn basketball flight or just a visit to Columbia, women tend to cause decisions to be made that sometimes are good, sometimes are regrettable.
Yeah. You mentioned the scenery for me and his mom on the way back. I think his
scenery will be in town.
Experience is going to be pretty daggum solid all day Saturday. He's never seen a game in the stadium, and he's never seen what happens outside. So,
exactly.
Derek, I just pulled up your town. I've never heard of Pineville. You're right; it is not very big, but it does have. Now, how do you pronounce this? The Guyandotte River? Guyandotte River.
Yeah, Guyandotte River. Yeah.
Okay, and then of course there's a little creek off of it down here that's got the Pinnacle Drive-In sitting on it.
Yes, Pinnacle Drive-In is the best chili dogs you'll ever have in your life, my man.
They look fantastic. I pulled up a picture.
Yeah,
looks incredible.
Pinnacle Creek was an area where there were mines. There were a lot of people when the mines were still very active. That's where a lot of people were mining, was in Pinnacle Creek, and Pinnacle Creek was also where you would go with your significant other if you needed somewhere to park. So I that was the high school strategy of you're going to Pinnacle Creek. Okay, we got you.
That's kind of like south of the border. But maybe I don't think there's anything like south of the border.
This was the story with Pineville, and this is a true story. It sounds like a joke, but it's a true story. We were a town with one stoplight, and they took it out and made it a four-way stop.
Oh,
you didn't even need a stoplight, man.
Wow,
it was just unnecessary.
Yeah, it's overkill. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Let's vote on getting rid of this daggum stoplight.
We've had enough.
4-2.
Yeah, Derek, this is a beautiful little town, man.
I bet it's pretty.
If you get there, if you can get there.
I bet when it snows, you can
even now self-service
Christmas card.
Fabulous. Yeah, exactly.
You said what now? Self-service what?
It's still not fabulous. Even now. So crazy.
This is a beautiful little place. I maybe one day we'll make it up into your neck of the woods and stop by, eat at the what's it called again?
Pinnacle Drive-In. And the funny thing is now, what's big there now is the Hatfield and McCoy trails, which are if you do that side by side and those things where people go out. I have friends down here who go up there and ride their side by sides and really do a lot of that. And the county, Wyoming County, and the county next to it, McDowell County, There's like people that have gone up there and bought property now because it's so cheap, because they like to be able to do that sort of thing. The outdoors, riding your side by side, and you'll see those all over the place up there now. There's prep.
Man, that is awesome. Maybe I'll stop in and stop into the Travelers Roadhouse. I got a feeling somebody in there probably wouldn't like me around very much. That looks like a tough joint. Derek, hey man, safe travels. Can't wait to listen to the call on Saturday. It's a big game for Gamecock basketball, and they got a great chance to go win it. And so we'll enjoy listening to you courtside up there in Bloomington, man. Thanks so much for your time as always.
All right, guys, take care.
See you soon. There you go. Thanks, Derek Scott. He is an amazing asset to this entire university, Carolina basketball and Carolina baseball, which will be cranking up here in a couple of months.